Okay, so welcome to video number 2 for Module 5. This is a follow-up to the first part where we talked about the top 13 communication skills. Now we're going to look at the building blocks of integrity. So what are these exactly? I've mentioned them, but I haven't really gone into detail about what these are. Essentially, they are investments into the joint emotional bank account that we're going to make. So they're contributions of positive interactions and good feelings. They're the foundations of respect, personal responsibility, and appreciation. And like I said, they're the foundation of positive interactions because when we're guided by integrity, the positivity starts to flow as opposed to just preventing the negative from growing. So this is the real foundation of which you're creating the ground spring of support and appreciation and strong feelings of closeness and connection. The building blocks are essentially the basic components of integrated self-expression. And when I use the word integrity, I'm referring to the ability to integrate all aspects of ourself and our value systems into our daily actions and communication. So to express ourselves with integrity basically means expressing ourselves in a way that integrates our full being and respects other people at the same time. Now, the reason why these building blocks are so important, in addition to just shoring up the negative with the basic communication skills, is based on the premise of the second law of thermodynamics. And this basically says that in closed energy systems, things tend to run down and get less orderly over time. So that means even all things being the same, things will decline over time unless you infuse it with new energy and fuel, so to speak. So how this applies to marriages, which is essentially a marriage is a closed energy system. If you don't do anything to make it better, even if you do nothing wrong, the marriage will still decline over time. That's why the basics of communication are not going to be enough, because those essentially, most of them, are really about preventing harm and reducing the negative. So the building blocks are going to be the fuel, they're going to be the infusion of energy and positivity into our marriage system. And marriages are a system. We have set dynamics and ways of relating to each other, and we have to be able to keep that alive and dynamic. Here are the building blocks: taking responsibility, apologies, validation, conscious politeness, compliments, appreciation, and affection. And I'm going to go through these one by one. Taking responsibility is essentially a commitment to always owning your part. We always play a part in everything, even if it's small. I like to look at relationships not as 50-50, but as 100%, 100%. Each of us is 100% responsible. Now, apologies is really connected to taking responsibility because it's an acknowledgement of how your actions affected your partner. Apologies have to keep the focus on them to be effective. And for example, I'm sorry, I see what you mean. I was wrong. I can see how that would be upsetting. I should have asked you first. I wish now I'd done it differently, or I didn't realize it, but now I do. Thank you for telling me how you feel. I'm so sorry. You can see how in these examples, it's not about the person who's apologizing. It's about the person that they're apologizing to. Now, there is a way to apologize in a way that makes it about us, and that would be the artful apologies that explore our inner world. So in this case, we're looking at ourselves, but we're doing it in service of understanding what we did in order to take greater responsibility and to be in service of our partner. So we can ask ourselves, well, first we'll apologize and say, I'm sorry I didn't call. Why didn't I call? What was my motivation? What was going on for me? Was I mad? Then I didn't realize it. And then you're thinking about how you can make changes instead of continuing to repeat the behavior. And so in that way, you can shine the light on yourself a little bit in a way that it still keeps it about taking responsibility to your partner. So how do we apologize when we think that we're not at fault? There is actually a way that we can do that. We can do this by acknowledging our partner's feelings and give our perspective. It could be something like, I realize that you felt hurt by what I said. I'm really sorry about that. That was not my intention. I wonder if there was a misunderstanding. So in that way, we're able to hold our ground a little bit, not take responsibility for something we don't think that we were responsible for, while at the same time still apologizing for the impact that it had. Now, there are times where it seems like apologies don't work, and that would be a time where you've already apologized and you feel like that person is still bringing it up and it hasn't worked to help the person get over it. So what we do in that type of situation is we just say, you know, what do you need from me? I've noticed that I've apologized and it keeps coming up again. I have expressed that I am sorry. Is there something else that I can do? And then that can be a chance for that person to explore what's going on for them. You know, why are they still bringing it up? There might be something they need from you that they haven't thought of that would be helpful, and then you can move forward. Or your question could help them realize that maybe there's some other reason why they're hanging on to that, and they can look at that. You know, maybe there's something, maybe they're wired into a past experience, and that's helpful for them to realize that that's what's going on so they can move on. I just want to say that there's absolutely no shame in apologizing. In some situations, certain partners can feel like apologizing is sort of losing face or compromising themselves or going along with something they don't feel right, or maybe they feel like a doormat for apologizing. But if you're doing it right, all you're doing is being a stand-up person. You are taking full responsibility, which is very self-respecting. And there's ways to do it where you are still holding your ground. But if you remember that the whole purpose of apologizing is to really kind of show how you recognize how something you've done has impacted your partner, that's all you're really doing. You're not saying, I'm a bad person, I have bad intentions. You're just saying, I can see how this impacted you, and I'm sorry for that. That may help a little bit in times where it feels a little bit uncomfortable. Now, another building block that's similar to apologizing is validation. It's not the same thing exactly, but it does serve to create greater understanding and empathy. In fact, the entire purpose of validation really is the demonstration of understanding. And that's all it is you're letting them know, if I were in this situation, I would feel that way too, or I can see why you would feel that way. This could never be an untrue statement. You know, sometimes we have a hard time validating others because we think that if they're responding a certain way, perhaps they've misunderstood. Maybe they're perceiving things the wrong way. Maybe you really just don't understand why they're having the response that they're having. And so your tendency is to not want to validate, but to argue or show another point of view. But if you look at it as just simply saying, if I were you in the situation, I would feel that way too, and knowing that could never be untrue. If you really were them, you would be responding that way too, even if you yourself wouldn't. So that kind of lets you off the hook of having to agree with its premise of their response, or, you know, think that in any way that that's the right way to be. It's just saying that you understand. And when you can do this, you're creating a very powerful way for your partner to feel safe and close to you, and they will be way more likely to hearing your point of view after they've been validated. Validation is a powerful antidote to criticism, contempt, and defensiveness. So just for the purpose of that, if you can infuse your relationship with healthy doses of validation, you're going to be keeping those things at bay. Now, this is especially important for men, and I hate to be generalizing because this isn't always the case. This really isn't always the case, but in general, there is a gender dynamic where men tend to be more rational in response to their female partner's emotional expressions. The tendency is to just want to help and to fix it. But you don't actually have to feel those feelings or share the same feelings in order to validate your partners. Now, if you have a hard time knowing how to validate, or it doesn't come naturally to you, there is a really easy formula. It's the 2 A's of acknowledgement and acceptance. Now, acknowledgement is just defined as being willing to agree that your partner really is having the experience that they say they are. That's not the same thing, again, as agreeing with, you know, their response or saying that I would feel that way if I were me. It just means validating that they are having that experience, okay? You may think it's crazy, but it's the truth for them. So you want to ask yourself, what's the positive intention behind what they're saying? What do they ultimately want? It really could just be connection. Acceptance is basically just that you love your partner as they are, warts and all, and they do the same for you. And it's not really something that you do, it's just a mindset, it's a shift in your attitude. And sometimes people are afraid of acceptance because they feel like they're endorsing problematic behavior and that it will only lead to being walked all over. But actually the opposite is true. Because the irony is that when people feel really accepted for who they are, that's when they do their very best to make their partners happy. Unless you're dealing with certain personality disorders, but that's another topic altogether. The truth is that radical acceptance is really the starting point for all transformation. So I'm just going to give you a quick formula for how to acknowledge and for how to accept. First, you just want to say, it seems like you blank, okay, and paraphrase in a sentence or two to what you think your partner might be experiencing. And then have a guess at how that must feel. And then just say, I'm sorry that you feel that way. And you're guessing, and they might have already told you exactly how they feel, but if they haven't, you can guess as to what that is. Remember that people in pain, they want to be validated before they can work on fixing or solving the problem. How to accept when you don't really accept? Try again to tune into your partner's positive intention, and remember that their feelings are about them, and this is huge. You have to be able to separate yourself, and this is where the boundaries come in. It's so much easier to just accept, and acknowledge our partner's feelings, even though we might not agree with why they're feeling that way, if we just see that they're them and we are us. And we don't have to share those feelings. It's really just reaching across that divide between us and another person and accepting them as another person and knowing that their feelings say only something about them and nothing about you, really. I mean, when you're apologizing for something, you're owning your part. But in this case where you're validating, that's not really what the goal is. It's not to take responsibility, it's just to accept. Now, this is a really fun building block. I really like this one because I think that we tend to save our worst behavior for the ones that we're closest to sometimes. But choosing to be polite can be a very powerful way of, communicating with integrity and also paving the way for really good feelings in the relationship. So save our best behaviors for the ones we love the most is the motto for choosing to be polite. Because we get comfortable and we tend to forget this with the people that we see all the time, it actually is extremely powerful. It makes a very great impression. Try to do this even if your partner is not polite, because it can surprise them and create goodwill and good feelings. Another fantastic building block is compliment. And this is basically just expressing the things that you like. And you want to look for opportunities to do this because praise goes a long way. It's a reminder of the positive things. It's a choice to focus attention on the things that you like. So you're going to look for things that you admire and then praise them outwardly, express them outwardly. I just loved watching you play with the kids tonight. Thank you so much for dealing with the insurance company. I noticed you're stressed out lately and you're handling it really well. Things like that. Because change doesn't occur unless people feel accepted, as I already said. But even if that's not the goal, it's really just about noticing what is positive right now. It can be reinforcing, but even if it's not, without any ulterior motive, it's such a powerful tool for creating connection. Now, appreciation is another building block, which is very similar to complimenting, but it's different in that for appreciation, you're consciously focusing on them and what they want to be appreciated for. Complimenting is expressing things that you like, things that you noticed, things that they might not be a big deal for them, but appreciation is knowing what they want to be known for, what they want you to see. A clue can be, if they haven't been outward about what they want to be appreciated for, is people tend to appreciate others for the things they want to be appreciated for. My husband appreciates me for things that I think are honestly no big deal, but he might not notice the things I really want him to notice. So you can ask your partner or you can look for the clues. And there's a really fantastic book, if you haven't already heard of it, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. And it's basically talking about how you need to know your partner's love language, because we all receive love in different ways. So for one person it might be affection, and for another person it might be attention or giving gifts or things like that. So it's along these same lines, knowing your partner and what you can appreciate them for that will be money in the bank money in that joint emotional bank. And finally, this is my personal favorite of the building blocks, is affection. Affection is awesome because it reduces adrenaline. It creates the sense of being on the same team. And it can be super small things. It can be low key. It can be holding hands. It can be touching your partner's arm in passing. It can be a smile. It physiologically creates a sense of safety and emotional connection and security. So this is going to reduce your cortisol, and that will, of course, reduce your tendency for blaming or fight or flight reactions. Plus, it just feels good. It's a feel-good building block, and it's a really easy way to infuse the relationship with some positivity to up that ratio. So that is it for the building blocks. You have finished Module 5, and so just go ahead and check out the assignments video. Good luck with those, and I look forward to seeing you inside of Module 6. So that is it for the building blocks. You have finished Module 5, and so just go ahead and check out the assignments video. Good luck with those, and I look forward to seeing you inside of Module 6.